I didn't pull the trigger because I was angry. Anger makes you shaky. Anger makes you miss. I pulled the trigger because the glass vial in Morgan's hand was tilted at a 45-degree angle, and the clear liquid inside was 1 second away from melting my little sister's eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't warn her. I just exhaled and ended the nightmare. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The flight back to the States was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually helps you sleep, but I couldn't close my eyes. After 3 tours with the Corps, coming home always felt stranger than leaving. You expect the world to be exactly how you left it, frozen in amber, waiting for you to step back into the frame. But it never is. I was discharged on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, I was pulling my truck into the gravel driveway of the farmhouse my parents had built 40 years ago. It was a sprawling place in upstate New York, surrounded by maples that should have been bright orange this time of year. But as I killed the engine, the first thing I noticed wasn't the leaves. It was the fence. The old white picket fence my dad and I had painted the summer before he passed was gone, replaced by a high, aggressively modern privacy wall that looked like it belonged in a fortress, not a family home. It felt cold, unwelcoming. I grabbed my duffel bag, the gravel crunching under my boots. I hadn't told them I was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise for Violet. My little sister was only 22, 10 years younger than me. Since Mom and Dad died in that crash 3 years ago, I had been sending every paycheck back to her and Uncle Felix, who had moved in to help look after her. I reached for the front door, but my key didn't fit. The lock had been changed. I knocked. A sharp, impatient rap. Moments later, the door swung open. It wasn't Violet. It wasn't Uncle Felix. A woman stood there. She was striking, I'll give her that. Sharp features, expensive blonde hair, and eyes that scanned me like she was pricing a used car. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was my mother's. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice clipped. "I'm Hunter," I said, dropping the bag. "I live here." "Who are you?" Her expression didn't change, but her posture stiffened. "Oh, the Marine. Felix said you were away." "I'm back," I said, stepping past her before she could block me. "Where's Violet?" "Hunter." Uncle Felix came hurrying down the hallway. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. He used to be a linebacker of a man, loud and full of bad jokes. Now, he looked like he was shrinking inside his own clothes. He hugged me, but it was weak. Nervous. "You're early," Felix said, glancing at the woman. We didn't expect you for another month." "Deployment got cut short," I said, looking between them. "Felix, who is this?" "This is Morgan," Felix said, his voice dropping a decibel. "My wife." I blinked. "Wife? You didn't tell me you got married." "It was sudden," Morgan interjected, smoothing the lapel of my mother's robe. "We didn't want to bother you while you were serving your country." The way she said serving your country sounded like an insult. "Where is she?" I asked again, my patience thinning. "She's in her room," Morgan said quickly. "She's not feeling well. Best to let her sleep." I ignored her. I walked past them, up the stairs, the wood creaking under my boots. The hallway smelled different. Too much floral perfume, masking the old smell of wood polish and dust. I got to Violet's door and knocked softly. "Vi? It's Hunter." Silence. I turned the knob. Locked. "Vi." I heard a shuffle inside, then the click of the lock. The door opened a crack. When I saw her, my stomach dropped. Violet had always been vibrant. Rosy cheeks, bright eyes, full of life. The girl standing in the shadows of the room looked like a ghost. She was thin, her collarbones protruding sharply against her oversized sweater. Her hair was dull, but it was her eyes that scared me. They were wide, darting to the hallway behind me, checking to see if we were alone. "Hunter," she whispered, like she wasn't sure I was real. "I'm here, Vi," I said, pushing the door open and stepping inside. I pulled her into a hug. She felt fragile, like a bird made of hollow bones. She didn't hug me back immediately. She froze, trembling against my chest. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered into my shoulder. I pulled back, holding her by the shoulders. What? Why? This is our house. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. She looked at the door, then back at me. She pulled her sleeve down over her wrist, a quick, jerky motion. It's not our house anymore, Hunter, she whispered, barely audible. It's hers. I frowned, my thumb brushing against her cheek where a smudge of dirt, or maybe a bruise, was poorly covered with makeup. What do you mean? Felix's family. Felix doesn't make the rules, she said, her voice shaking. She does. And she hears everything. As if on cue, the floorboards in the hallway creaked. I spun around. Morgan was standing at the top of the stairs, smiling. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile a shark gives before it drags you under. Dinner is in 10 minutes, she said sweetly. Don't be late. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking like a countdown. I looked back at Violet. She was trembling. And for the first time since I'd faced enemy fire in the desert, I felt a cold spike of fear. Not for me. For her. I didn't know what war I had just walked into, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't leaving until I won it. Dinner was a silent battlefield. The kind where you don't fire shots, but you feel every threat lingering in the air like smoke. Morgan sat at the head of the table, in my father's chair, cutting into a roasted chicken with surgical precision. Felix sat to her right, shoulders hunched, pushing food around his plate like a scolded child. Violet sat across from me, staring at her empty plate. She hadn't been given food yet. I was halfway through my mashed potatoes when I noticed it. Morgan had served everyone except Violet. The plate in front of my sister was bare, the fork and knife sitting untouched like props in a play. Vi, you're not eating? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Violet's eyes flicked to Morgan, then back to her lap. She didn't answer. Morgan dabbed her lips with a napkin, smiling that razor-thin smile again. Violet has been struggling with her appetite lately. We're working on portion control. Portion control? I repeated slowly, setting my fork down. She looks like she hasn't eaten in days. Hunter, don't, Felix muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Don't what? I said, turning to him. Don't ask why my sister is sitting at a dinner table without dinner. Morgan's smile didn't falter. If anything, it deepened. Violet knows the rules. She asks permission before she eats. It's a matter of discipline, structure, something she lacked before I arrived. I felt my jaw tighten. She's 22 years old. She doesn't need to ask permission to eat in her own house. It's not her house, Morgan said, her voice still sweet, still calm. It's Felix's house, and by extension mine. Violet is a guest here, just like you. The air went cold. I stared at her, then at Felix, waiting for him to say something. Anything. But he just sat there, gripping his fork like it was a lifeline, eyes glued to his plate. I turned back to Violet. Vi, you hungry? She nodded, barely. I reached across the table, grabbed the serving plate of chicken, and dropped a generous piece onto her plate. Then I scooped mashed potatoes and green beans beside it. There, I said, sliding the plate toward her. Eat. Morgan's smile finally cracked. Just a little. Hunter, I don't think you understand the system we've built here. Violet has issues with impulsivity. She needs boundaries. She needs food. I shot back. Violet picked up her fork with trembling hands and took a small bite. Her eyes filled with tears, but she kept chewing. Morgan stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Excuse me, she said, her voice ice cold now. I've lost my appetite. She walked out of the room, her heels echoing down the hallway like gunshots. Felix finally looked up, his face pale and sweaty. You shouldn't have done that, he whispered. Done what? Fed my sister. You don't understand, Felix said, his voice shaking. She gets upset when things don't go her way. Then maybe she should stop playing dictator in our family's house, I said. Felix flinched like I'd slapped him. He stood, mumbled something about checking on Morgan, and disappeared down the hall. That left me and Violet alone at the table. She was eating slowly now, methodically, like she was afraid the food would vanish if she looked away. Vi, I said gently. Talk to me. What the hell is going on here? She swallowed hard, glancing toward the hallway. She hears everything, Violet whispered. She has cameras. Microphones. I don't know where they all are, but she knows everything we say. My blood ran cold. Cameras? Where? Everywhere. The living room. The hallway. My bedroom door. She installed them after she moved in. She said it was for security. I leaned back in my chair, processing. Surveillance. Control. Isolation. Classic tactics. I'd seen warlords do the same thing to villages overseas. Why didn't you call me? I asked. Violet's lip trembled. She took my phone. She said I was spending too much time online, that it was unhealthy. Felix backed her up. He always backs her up. And Uncle Felix? What's his deal? Violet's face darkened. He's scared of her. I don't know what she did to him, but he's not the same. He used to stand up for me. Now he just does whatever she says. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'm here now. She's not going to hurt you anymore. Violet's eyes filled with fresh tears. You don't know what she's capable of, Hunter. She's not just mean. She's calculating. She plans everything. And if you get in her way... She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening. I followed her gaze. Morgan was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching us. I don't know how long she'd been there. Violet, Morgan said softly. You should go to your room now. It's past your bedtime. It's 7:30, I said flatly. And Violet needs her rest, Morgan replied, her tone firm. Don't you, Violet? Violet stood immediately, abandoning her half-eaten plate. She didn't look at me. She just walked past Morgan, head down, and disappeared upstairs. Morgan stayed in the doorway, her eyes locked on mine. You and I need to have a conversation, Hunter. I'm listening. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. The click of the latch felt ominous. I understand you've been away for a long time, she began, her voice measured. And I understand you feel protective of your sister. But things have changed. This household has rules now. Structure. Violet was a mess when I arrived, depressed, unmotivated, wasting away in her room. I gave her purpose. You gave her fear, I said. Morgan's eyes flashed. I gave her discipline, something she desperately needed, and something you're not going to undermine. I stood, my full height towering over her. Let me make something clear. This is my parents' house, my sister's house. You're the guest here. And if I find out you've been hurting her, you'll what? Morgan interrupted, stepping closer. Hit me? Threaten me? Go ahead, Hunter. Give me a reason to call the sheriff. I'm sure they'd love to hear about the unstable veteran with anger issues who came home and started making threats. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. She was baiting me, testing me. I'm watching you, I said quietly. Morgan smiled. Good. Then you'll see how well I've taken care of your family. She turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the dining room with a plate of cold food and a growing sense of dread. I went upstairs after clearing the table. Felix's bedroom door was closed, the light off. I pressed my ear against it and heard muffled voices. Morgan's sharp and commanding, Felix's weak and apologetic. I moved to Violet's door next and knocked softly. Vi, it's me. She opened the door just wide enough for me to slip inside. Her room looked different. The posters she used to have on the walls were gone. The bookshelf was empty. The space felt sterile, like a hospital room. She redecorated, Violet said bitterly. Said my old stuff was childish. I sat on the edge of her bed. We're going to fix this, Vi? I promise. How? She asked, her voice breaking. She has Felix wrapped around her finger. She controls everything. The bank accounts, the bills, even the groceries. I can't leave. I have nowhere to go. You have me, I said firmly. Violet looked at me, hope flickering in her tired eyes. What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away, but as I sat there, looking at my little sister, broken, afraid, trapped, I felt something shift inside me. The part of me that had been trained to hunt, to observe, to strike when the moment was right. I'm going to find out who she really is, I said. And then I'm going to make sure she never hurts you again. Violet nodded, wiping her eyes. I left her room and went to mine. Or what used to be mine. It had been converted into a storage space, filled with boxes and furniture covered in dust. I found my old duffel bag buried under a tarp and pulled out a small device I'd kept from my last deployment, a wireless audio transmitter. Military grade. Undetectable. If Morgan wanted to play surveillance games, I'd play too. But I'd play better. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours between midnight and dawn lying on the lumpy cot in the garage, running systems checks on my gear. Old habits don't die, they just wait for deployment. And I was deployed. By 0600, I had a plan. If Morgan was using surveillance to control this house, I needed to own the airwaves. I waited until I heard the distinct hum of her luxury SUV pulling out of the driveway, her daily yoga and brunch ritual that apparently took 4 hours. Felix left 10 minutes later, heading to his office in town, looking like a man marching to the gallows. The house was silent. I moved fast. I swept the living room first. It didn't take long. Hidden behind the spine of a hollowed-out encyclopedia on the bookshelf was a lens the size of a pinhead. High-end stuff. The kind that records to a cloud server. I didn't disable it. That would alert her. Instead, I took a piece of clear tape, smudged it with a little thumb grease, and placed it over the lens. It would look like a natural blur, a focus error. Frustrating, but not suspicious. Next, I hit the kitchen. Under the island counter, taped near the back, was a microphone. This one I left alone. If she wanted to listen, I'd give her something to hear. I went upstairs to Violet's room. She was sitting on her bed, staring at the wall, her hands folded in her lap. She jumped when I walked in. "It's safe?" I whispered, pointing to the hallway. "She's gone." Violet let out a breath she must have been holding for hours. "Did you find them?" "Enough of them," I said. "But we need to be smart. If we just rip them out, she'll know we're fighting back. We need to make her think she's winning while we find the real dirt." "What kind of dirt?" "The kind that puts people in prison," I said grimly. "But first, I need to see something. Yesterday, when you pulled your sleeve down, show me your arm, Vi." She froze, instinctively clutching her left wrist. "It's nothing. I fell. I'm clumsy." "Violet, look at me. You never fell a day in your life. You were the only kid on the block who could climb the old oak tree without a scratch." She looked down, tears welling up again. Slowly, painfully, she rolled up the sleeve of her sweater. I felt the rage boil in my gut, hot and acidic. Her forearm was a canvas of bruises. Not fresh, angry purples, but old, sickly yellows and greens. The shape was unmistakable. Fingerprints. Small, sharp points of pressure where someone had dug their nails in deep and twisted. "She does it where it doesn't show," Violet whispered, refusing to look at the marks. "Under my clothes. Or in my hair. She says pain is the best teacher." I gently touched the skin near her elbow. "Did Felix see this?" He tries not to look," she sobbed. "He knows, Hunter. But he's terrified. She told him if he ever tried to leave her, she'd ruin him. She'd take everything." "Take what?" "The house. The money. Everything. She says she has files on him. Business things. Taxes. I don't know. But he believes her." I pulled her sleeve back down, covering the evidence. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. This wasn't just abuse. This was extortion. Morgan wasn't just a cruel stepmother. She was a professional. You don't set up a surveillance network and blackmail your husband unless you've done this before. "Okay," I said, my voice calm. "Here's what we do. You keep your head down. You play her game. Be the perfect, obedient stepdaughter. Don't give her a reason to touch you. I'm going to find out who Morgan really is." "How?" "I still have friends in low places," I said. "But I need you to trust me. No matter what happens in the next few days. I'm not leaving you. Even if it looks like I am." She nodded, wiping her face. I spent the afternoon in my truck, parked down the road where the Wi-Fi signal still reached. I opened my laptop and logged into a secure server I hadn't touched since discharge. I typed in the name Morgan Layfrey. That was the joke name she probably used, But her legal name on the marriage license Felix had left on the desk was Morgan Vane. Nothing. No criminal record. No credit hits. Just a clean slate starting 3 years ago. That was a red flag. Nobody has no history. I dug deeper. I ran a facial recognition search using a still frame I'd grabbed from the hidden camera feed in the living room. It took 20 minutes to churn through the public databases. Ping. A match. But not for Morgan Vane. The photo was 5 years old. The hair was brunette, not blonde. But the eyes, those cold, shark-like eyes, were identical. Vanessa Thorne. Wanted for questioning in connection with the suspicious death of her husband, oil tycoon Richard Thorne, in Texas. Case cold due to lack of evidence. I sat back, the air in the truck cab suddenly feeling very thin. She wasn't just an abuser. She was a widowmaker. I closed the laptop. I had the ammo. Now I needed the shot. But when I got back to the house, the atmosphere had shifted. The front door was wide open. I ran inside, hand instinctively reaching for a sidearm I wasn't wearing. Violet. No answer. I sprinted to the kitchen. Empty. Then I heard it. A low, guttural sound from the living room. I rounded the corner and stopped. Felix was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands, sobbing. And Morgan was standing by the fireplace, holding something small and black in her hand. It was my audio bug, the one I'd left under the kitchen counter. She looked up at me, and the smile on her face was terrifying. It wasn't angry. It was victorious. "Welcome home, Hunter," she said, tossing the bug into the fire. It crackled and popped as the plastic melted. "I think it's time we discussed your living arrangements." She turned to the camera hidden in the bookshelf, the one I'd taped over, and peeled the tape off with a slow, deliberate motion. She looked directly into the lens, her eyes locking with mine across the digital divide. "Game on, soldier," she mouthed. I didn't flinch. I'd learned a long time ago that when someone wants you to react, the best weapon you have is stillness. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and stared at Morgan like she was a training target at 600 yards. She stepped away from the fireplace, brushing ash from her manicured fingers. Felix was still hunched on the couch, trembling like a cornered animal. He wouldn't look at me. "I found this," Morgan said, holding up a second device, taped under the dining room table. "And this," she gestured to a third piece of electronics on the mantel, in the hall closet. "You've been busy, Hunter." "So have you," I replied evenly. "How many cameras do you have watching my sister sleep?" Morgan's smile thinned. "I don't appreciate accusations, especially from someone who's proven himself to be paranoid and invasive. Breaking into someone's home, planting listening devices, that's illegal, you know. This isn't your home." "Actually," she said, producing a folded document from her pocket, "it is. Felix signed over power of attorney to me last month. For health reasons. Isn't that right, honey?" Felix nodded weakly, still staring at the floor. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Power of attorney meant she controlled everything. The bank accounts, the property, even medical decisions. "What health reasons?" I asked, my voice cold. Morgan tilted her head, feigning concern. "Felix has been struggling. Memory lapses. Confusion. His doctor recommended I take over the more stressful decisions. It's for his own good." I looked at Felix. He was 62, not 80. And 6 months ago, he'd been sharp as a tack, running his own accounting firm. Now he looked like a ghost. "Let me see the paperwork," I said. Morgan folded the document and slipped it back into her pocket. "I don't think that's necessary. What is necessary is for you to understand your position here. You're a guest, Hunter, and guests who violate the trust of their hosts don't get to stay. You kicking me out. I'm giving you a choice," she said smoothly. "You can leave voluntarily, or I can file a restraining order. I have documentation of your erratic behavior, the bugs, the threats. Felix will testify that you've been unstable since you returned. Won't you, Felix?" Felix nodded again, his voice a whisper. "I'm sorry, Hunter. I think you need help." The betrayal hit harder than I expected, not because I blamed him, but because I knew she'd broken him so completely that he believed his own lies. "Where's Violet?" I asked, ignoring Morgan's ultimatum. Upstairs. Resting. She's had a difficult day. I want to see her. Morgan stepped between me and the staircase. I don't think that's wise. You're clearly in a volatile state. I don't want you upsetting her further. I could have moved her. Could have picked her up and set her aside like a piece of furniture. But that's what she wanted. An excuse. A reason to call the cops and have me dragged out in cuffs. So I backed down. For now, I'll be in the garage, I said, turning toward the door. If you need me, you know where I am. Morgan's voice followed me, sweet and venomous. Oh, Hunter? One more thing. I called a locksmith. The garage door will be rekeyed by morning. For security purposes. I didn't respond. I just walked out, the sound of her laughter echoing behind me like nails on a chalkboard. Outside, the air was crisp and cold. I walked to my truck, climbed in, and sat in the dark, thinking. She'd outmaneuvered me, cut off my access, isolated me from Violet. And now she had Felix signing whatever she wanted. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. This better be good. Reeves, it's Hunter. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. No kidding. Thought you were dead, man. What's it been, 2 years? 3. Listen, I need a favor. Off the books. Sergeant Reeves had been my squad leader overseas. He'd left the Corps a year before I did and now worked as a private investigator in Albany. If anyone could dig up dirt fast, it was him. What kind of favor? He asked, his tone shifting to business. Background check. Deep dive. Woman named Morgan Vane. Married my uncle 6 months ago. I think she's running a con, maybe worse. What makes you think that? She's got surveillance all over the house. She's manipulated my uncle into signing over power of attorney. And I found a match on facial recognition. She used to be Vanessa Thorne, connected to a suspicious death in Texas. Reeves whistled low. You don't mess around, do you? Can you help or not? Yeah, I can help. But it's going to take a few days. Maybe a week if she's good at covering her tracks. I don't have a week, I said. She's isolating my sister. I think she's planning something. Then you need to get the sister out of there. Tonight. Can't. Morgan's got eyes everywhere. If I try to pull Violet out, she'll call the cops and spin it as a kidnapping. Reeves sighed. All right. I'll expedite. Give me 48 hours. But Hunter? If this woman is who you think she is, you need to be careful. People like that don't just give up when they're cornered. They escalate. I know. I hung up and stared at the dark house. One window was still lit. Violet's room. I could see her shadow moving behind the curtain. She was pacing. I grabbed a pen and a scrap of paper from the glove box and scribbled a quick note. Stay strong. I'm not leaving. Trust me. I folded it, walked across the yard, and tossed a pebble at her window. The shadow stopped. The curtain shifted. Violet's face appeared, pale and scared. I held up the note and pointed to the drain pipe that ran along the side of the house. She nodded, understanding. I climbed halfway up, wedged the note into a gap in the siding where she could reach it, and climbed back down. By the time I hit the ground, the curtain had closed again. I walked back to my truck and drove into town. If Morgan thought locking me out would stop me, she was wrong. I parked outside the county clerk's office and waited. It opened at 9. I was the first one through the door. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain, looked up from her coffee. Help you? I need to see a marriage license. Felix Harding and Morgan Vane. Filed about 6 months ago. She typed into her computer, squinting at the screen. Got it. You family. Nephew. She printed the document and slid it across the counter. I scanned it quickly. Morgan's full legal name was listed as Morgan Elise Vane. Date of birth put her at 34. Previous address was listed as Miami, Florida. I took a photo of the document with my phone and left. Next stop was the law office of Gregory Kane, the family attorney who'd handled my parents' estate. His secretary tried to wave me off, but I walked past her and knocked on Kane's door. Hunter. Kane looked up from his desk, surprised. I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk. About Felix. And his new wife. Kane's expression darkened. He gestured to the chair across from him. Close the door. I did. I assume you've met Morgan, he said carefully. Yeah. And I know she got Felix to sign over power of attorney. Kane rubbed his temples. He came in here 3 weeks ago with that woman. She did all the talking. Told me Felix was having cognitive issues, that he needed someone to manage his affairs. I tried to advise against it. Told him power of attorney is a serious legal instrument. But he insisted. Did he seem coherent? Kane hesitated. Honestly, no. He seemed drugged. Slow. Compliant. I documented my concerns, but legally, there was nothing I could do to stop him. What about the estate? My parents left the house to me and Violet, not Felix. Correct. But Felix has been living there as a caretaker. Technically, Morgan has no claim to the property. But if she has power of attorney, she can make financial decisions on Felix's behalf, including using estate funds for household expenses. She's draining it. I suspected as much, Kane said grimly. I've seen this before. It's called undue influence. But proving it in court is nearly impossible without hard evidence. What if I told you she's done this before? That she's wanted in connection with another husband's death? Kane leaned forward. Then you need to call the police. Now. And say what? That I think my uncle's wife is suspicious? They'll laugh me out of the station. I need proof. Something concrete. Kane thought for a moment, then pulled out a business card. This is a forensic accountant. If Morgan's been moving money, he can trace it. But it'll cost you. I took the card. I'll pay. And Hunter. Kane's voice dropped. Be careful. If this woman is what you think she is, you're not just dealing with fraud. You're dealing with someone who's willing to kill. I left the office with a knot in my stomach and a plan forming in my mind. Morgan wanted a war? Fine. She just didn't know I'd been trained to win them. I spent the next 36 hours living out of my truck, parked deep in the tree line of the state forest that bordered my parents' property. I knew the terrain better than anyone. I'd hunted these woods since I was 12. Now, I was hunting something else. I had swapped my tactical gear for civilian camo, but the mindset was the same. I established a hide site on a ridge overlooking the house, using a high-powered spotting scope to monitor the activity below. It was a slow, agonizing burn. I watched Morgan come and go in her SUV. I watched Felix shuffle to his car in the mornings, looking more like a zombie than a man. But I didn't see Violet. Not once. The curtains in her room were drawn tight. No shadows. No movement. My gut twisted. Isolation is step 1 in psychological breaking. If Violet was locked in that room, Morgan was already in her head, rewriting reality. On the second night, my phone buzzed. It was Reeves. Check your secure email, he said, his voice tight. I found something. And Hunter? You were right. She's not just a con artist. She's a ghost. I opened the laptop, tethering it to my phone. The file Reeves had sent was thick. PDFs, scanned police reports, and a grainy photo from a Texas newspaper. I started reading. Vanessa Thorne, born Vanessa Rain, married to oil magnate Richard Thorne in 2018. Thorne died 6 months later. Cause of death, accidental overdose of heart medication. Toxicology report showed high levels of digitalis. I scrolled down. Prior marriage, 2015. Florida. Husband, Michael Gentry. Wealthy real estate developer. Died 4 months after the wedding. Cause of death, suicide. Carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage. 2 husbands. 2 fortunes inherited. 2 convenient deaths. But the kicker was the timeline. In both cases, she had isolated the victim from family, taken control of medical decisions, and liquidated assets into shell companies before the body was even cold. And now she was doing it to Felix. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking with a cold, controlled rage. She wasn't just draining the bank accounts. She was prepping the kill. But I needed more than a history lesson. I needed proof that she was doing it now. I packed up my gear and moved out. It was 0200 hours. The house was dark. I approached from the south, using the noise of the wind in the trees to mask my movement. I bypassed the front gate, too obvious, and scaled the stone wall near the garden shed. The shed was new, just like the fence. High-tech lock. No windows. I picked the lock in 30 seconds. Inside, it smelled of fertilizer and chemicals. I clicked on my red lens flashlight, sweeping the room. Shelves of gardening tools. Bags of soil. And in the corner, a locked cabinet marked hazardous. I jimmied the lock. Inside were 3 large industrial jugs. The labels were standard, heavy-duty cleaner. But the smell leaking from the caps wasn't cleaner. It was acrid, metallic. I carefully unscrewed one cap and shone the light inside. The liquid was thick, viscous. I took a sample kit from my pocket, standard issue for field testing unknown substances, and dipped a strip into the jug. It turned a violent, dark red. Hydrochloric acid. Industrial strength. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why would a gardener need 10 gallons of industrial acid? Unless they weren't gardening. I looked at the other jugs. Same label. Same liquid. And then I saw it. Tucked behind the jugs was a small, leather-bound notebook. I opened it. It was Felix's handwriting. But it wasn't accounting notes. It was a diary. October 12th. I feel so tired. Morgan says it's the stress. She gave me new pills today. Said they would help me sleep. October 15th. I can't remember signing the papers. Morgan says I did it last night. Why is my hand shaking? October 20th. She's angry about Violet. Says the girl is in the way. I told her Violet is my niece. I can't. But I'm so scared. Why am I so scared? I pocketed the diary. This was it. The smoking gun. Proof of drugging. Proof of coercion. I was about to leave when I heard a noise outside. Crunch. Crunch. Footsteps on gravel. I killed the light and froze. The shed door creaked open. I know you're in here, Hunter, Morgan's voice said. It was calm, almost bored. I didn't move. I was in the shadows, behind a stack of potting soil. You're so predictable, she continued, stepping inside. She was holding a flashlight in one hand and something else in the other. A taser. The hero complex. It's your weakness. She shone the light around the room. Come out. Let's talk about the acid. It's for the pool, obviously. But I'm sure your PTSD brain has cooked up some wonderful conspiracy. I stayed silent. She sighed. Fine. Have it your way. She reached for a switch on the wall. Click. The shed flooded with blinding white light. I squinted, my eyes adjusting. She was standing 10 feet away, the taser crackling in her hand. You're trespassing, she said, smiling. And in this state, I have the right to defend my property. She raised the taser. But she'd made a mistake. She was too close. I lunged. I covered the distance in 2 strides, knocking the taser from her hand with a sharp chop to her wrist. She screamed, a real scream this time, and stumbled back. I pinned her against the wall, my forearm against her throat. Listen to me. I growled, my face inches from hers. I know who you are, Vanessa. Her eyes went wide. The mask slipped. For the first time, I saw genuine fear. I know about Texas, I said. I know about Florida. And I know about the pills you're feeding Felix. She clawed at my arm, gasping. You have no proof. I have the diary, I said, tapping my pocket. And I have the sample from these jugs. You're done. I let her go, stepping back. I'm calling the cops. And this time, I have the evidence. Morgan rubbed her throat, coughing. She looked at me, then at the taser on the floor. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. You think the police will believe you? She rasped. The unstable veteran who broke into my home? Who assaulted me? She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a small remote. I didn't just install cameras, Hunter, she said. I installed a silent alarm. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Sirens wailing in the distance. Fast. They'll be here in 2 minutes, she said, her smile returning. And when they arrive, they'll find me bruised and terrified, and you, standing over me. She ripped her own robe, tearing the fabric. Then she scratched her own face, drawing blood. Self-defense, she whispered. Get out, Hunter. Run. Or go to prison. I looked at the door, then at her. She was right. If I was here when they arrived, with her looking like that, I'd be in cuffs before I could say a word. And the evidence would disappear. I grabbed the diary and the sample kit. This isn't over, I said. Run, rabbit, she hissed. I bolted. I hit the tree line just as the first cruiser pulled into the driveway. I watched from the darkness as two deputies jumped out, guns drawn, running toward the shed where Morgan was now screaming for help. I had the proof, but I was a fugitive, and Violet was still inside. I spent the next hour moving through the woods like a ghost, circling back to my hide site on the ridge. My heart was pounding a rhythm against my ribs, but my mind was cold, analytical. Situation report. Morgan knows I know. She has escalated the timeline. The police are now her weapon, not mine. Violet is still inside. I reached my gear stash at 0315. I didn't pack up. I dug in. I pulled out my rifle, a bolt-action .308 I used for hunting, but modified with a high-end optic. I settled into the prone position, overlooking the house 800 yards away. Through the scope, the scene below was chaotic. Red and blue lights washed over the white siding. I saw the deputies taking statements. I saw Morgan, wrapped in a blanket, sobbing dramatically while pointing toward the woods. And then I saw Felix. He was standing on the porch, swaying. He looked wrong. His skin was gray even in the flashing lights. He was holding his stomach, doubling over every few seconds. I zoomed in. He wasn't just sick. He was dying. The new pills Morgan had mentioned in the diary. She must have upped the dose. Or switched the cocktail. The deputies finished their sweep of the tree line. They didn't look hard. They never do at night. And left around 0430. They clearly bought Morgan's story. Crazy brother breaks in, attacks wife, runs off. They'd have a warrant out for me by sunrise. As soon as the taillights faded, the house went dark again. But I kept watching. At 0500, the back door opened. Morgan came out. She wasn't crying anymore. She was dressed in black, jeans, turtleneck, gloves. She walked to the shed, which the cops hadn't even taped off, and dragged something out. A heavy, plastic tarp. She spread it on the grass near the garden. Then she went back inside and came out with a wheelchair. Violet was in it. My finger tightened on the trigger guard. Violet looked unconscious. Her head lolled to the side. Morgan wheeled her onto the patio, then stopped. She looked up at the sky, checking for what? Drones? Witnesses? She didn't look at the tree line. She thought I was running. She left Violet there and went back to the shed. She came out carrying one of the acid jugs. My breath hitched. This was it. She wasn't waiting for the accident to happen later. She was staging it now. Maybe she'd claim I came back. Maybe she'd claim Violet fell into the chemicals I had spilled during my break-in. She set the jug down next to the wheelchair. Then she went back inside. I had a choice. Take the shot now? No. Too risky. If I missed, or if I just wounded her, she could still hurt Violet before I could close the distance. And shooting an unarmed woman from the woods? That's murder, not defense. I needed her to commit the act. I needed the threat to be lethal and immediate. But I couldn't just watch. I keep my radio. Reeves. Wake up. I'm up, his voice crackled. Police scanner is going nuts. They're calling you a suspect in a domestic assault. Listen to me. She's escalating. She's got Violet in the yard. And she's got the acid. Hunter, don't do it. Don't take the shot. I need you to call the station. Tell them you have evidence that Morgan Vane is a flight risk. Tell them about the aliases. Tell them about the Texas murder. Buy me time. I'm already sending the file to the sheriff, Reeves said. But Hunter, if you pull that trigger, there's no coming back. I'm past coming back. I cut the connection. Below, the back door opened again. Morgan dragged Felix out. He was barely walking. She shoved him toward the garden chair. He collapsed into it, groaning. Look at her. I heard Morgan's voice drift up on the wind. It was faint, but clear. Look at your beautiful niece, Felix. She uncapped the jug. She's going to have a terrible accident, Morgan said, pouring some of the liquid into a glass beaker. And you're going to watch. And then, you're going to tell the police exactly what I tell you to say. She walked over to Violet. I adjusted my scope. Windage, 0. Elevation, 0. Range, 800 yards. I centered the crosshairs on the beaker in her hand. Morgan grabbed a handful of Violet's hair, yanking her head back. Violet moaned, stirring. "Wake up, princess," Morgan hissed. "Time for your facial." She raised the beaker. I exhaled. 1. She tilted the glass. 2. The liquid sloshed near the rim. 3. I squeezed. Crack. The sound of the shot tore through the valley like a thunderclap. Through the scope, I saw the beaker explode in Morgan's hand. Glass and liquid sprayed everywhere. She screamed, a high, piercing shriek, and dropped to her knees, clutching her chest. The bullet had passed through the beaker and impacted her shoulder, spinning her around. "Sniper!" I heard her scream. "Sniper!" She scrambled backward, crawling toward the house, leaving a trail of blood on the patio stones. I racked the bolt, chambering a fresh round. I didn't shoot again. The threat was neutralized. For now. But then I saw something that made my blood freeze. The liquid, the acid that had sprayed all over Violet's face and neck. Violet was waking up, wiping at her eyes. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't melting. She was just wet. I lowered the rifle, staring. The liquid was blue. Bright, electric blue. And then I remembered. 2 nights ago, when I first broke into the shed to check the inventory, I hadn't just taken a sample. I had swapped the jugs. I had poured the acid into the drainage ditch behind the barn and refilled the containers with industrial blue marking dye I found in the garage. I had forgotten. Morgan wasn't burning. She was just shot. And Violet was safe. But Morgan didn't know that yet. She was still screaming, thinking she was covered in acid too. I stood up, slung the rifle, and started running down the hill. The game wasn't over. But the rules had just changed. The woods were alive with the sound of chaos. From my vantage point, I could see the house swarming with blue lights. Ambulances. Cruisers. A SWAT van pulled into the driveway. Guys in heavy armor spilling out, rifles up. They were setting a perimeter. They were looking for me. I knew the terrain, but I also knew the math. A manhunt with this many resources has a shelf life. They'd have drones up in 20 minutes. Dogs in 30. I had to move. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I circled wide, moving downhill toward the old logging road that ran parallel to the property. My objective wasn't to escape. It was to infiltrate. I had to get back to the house. It sounded insane, but it was the only way. Morgan was injured, but she was still in control. She'd be spinning the narrative right now, the victim of a crazed sniper attack. Felix would back her up because he was terrified and drugged. And Violet was confused, soaked in blue dye, and probably in shock. I stashed my rifle in a hollow log near the creek bed. It was too heavy, too conspicuous. I kept my sidearm, a compact 9mm, and my knife. I stripped off my camo jacket, revealing a black thermal shirt underneath. I rubbed dirt on my face and hands to mask the shine of sweat. I approached the house from the north side, near the detached garage. The police focus was on the south, the direction the shot had come from. The north side was the blind spot. I waited until a cloud covered the moon, then sprinted across the open lawn, diving into the shadow of the garage. I could hear voices on the patio. Shot from the trees. He's crazy. He tried to kill me. Morgan was screaming, her voice hysterical. My arm. Oh God, my arm. Ma'am, stay still. The paramedics are patching you up, a deputy said. We have units sweeping the woods. He's going to come back, she shrieked. He wants to kill us all. You have to protect us. We have officers on every door, ma'am. I crept along the side of the garage until I could see the patio. Morgan was sitting on a stretcher, a paramedic wrapping her shoulder. It was a flesh wound, through and through. Painful, but not lethal. She was milking it for everything it was worth. But where was Violet? I scanned the area. There, sitting on the steps, wrapped in a shock blanket. A female deputy was kneeling next to her, talking softly. Violet looked dazed. She was wiping at her face, her fingers coming away blue. It burns, I heard Violet whisper. It burns. My heart stopped. Had I messed up? Was there still acid in the mix? The deputy shone a flashlight on Violet's face. Honey, let me look. It looks like paint. Does it hurt? It burns, Violet repeated, staring at nothing. Psychosomatic. She believed it was acid, so her brain was creating the pain. That's how deep Morgan had her claws in. Officer, Morgan yelled from the stretcher. Don't listen to her. She's in shock. My husband. Where's my husband? Mr. Harding is inside with the other medics, the deputy said. He's not doing well, ma'am. It's the stress. Morgan cried. Hunter did this to him. He poisoned him. The audacity was breathtaking. She was flipping the script in real time. I moved to the back of the garage, where the old servant's entrance was. It was locked, but I knew the code. My dad had set it to my birthday 20 years ago. I prayed they hadn't changed it. I punched in the numbers. Beep. Click. Thank you, Dad. I slipped inside. The mudroom was dark. I could hear heavy footsteps in the kitchen. Cops. I needed to get to Felix. If I could get him alone, if I could show him the diary, maybe I could break Morgan's hold. I moved through the shadows of the hallway, avoiding the patches of light from the kitchen. I heard the radio chatter. Suspect is Hunter Harding. Marine Recon. Armed and dangerous. Shoot on sight if he shows a weapon. Great. I reached the library door. It was cracked open. I saw Felix lying on the leather sofa, an EMT checking his vitals. BP is critically low, the EMT said to his partner. Pulse is thready. We need to transport him now. Wait, Felix wheezed. He grabbed the EMT's arm. Violet, is she? She's okay, sir. She's outside. Morgan, Felix whispered. Morgan said the acid. Shoo, save your strength. The EMTs started lifting him onto a stretcher. I couldn't get to him. Too many eyes. I retreated to the shadows of the stairwell. I had to wait for my moment. The front door opened, and the EMTs wheeled Felix out. The kitchen cleared out as the cops followed them. For a split second, the hallway was empty. I moved. I wasn't going for Felix. I was going for the one thing Morgan had forgotten in her panic. The safe. In the master bedroom. If she was running a long con, she'd have insurance. Passports. Cash. The real will. I took the stairs two at a time, silent as smoke. I reached the bedroom. It smelled of her perfume, sickly sweet. I went to the walk-in closet. The floor safe was under the rug. It was a digital keypad. For digits. I closed my eyes, thinking, what would a narcissist choose? Her birthday? No. Too easy. The date she won. The date she married Felix? I tried it. 0-5-1-2, error. The date her first husband died? I didn't know it. Think, Hunter. Think. Then I saw it. On the vanity table. A framed photo of herself. Just her. Standing on a beach, looking triumphant. The date stamped in the corner was 07-04. July 4th, Independence Day. I tried 0-7-0-4. Click. Whir. The door popped open. I grabbed the contents, a stack of cash, 3 passports with different names, and a thick manila envelope. I opened the envelope. It wasn't the will. It was a life insurance policy. On Violet. Taken out 2 weeks ago. Value, $5 million. Beneficiary, Morgan Vane. The pieces clicked. The acid wasn't just punishment. It was the setup. Violet dies of complications or suicide after the disfigurement. Morgan collects. I shoved the papers into my shirt. Freeze. I spun around. A deputy stood in the doorway, gun leveled at my chest. He looked young, terrified. Hands. Let me see your hands, he screamed. I raised my hands slowly. Don't shoot, I said calmly. I'm unarmed. Get on the ground. Now, I knelt. I have evidence, I said, nodding to the papers sticking out of my shirt. She's killing them. Look at the papers. Shut up. Face down. Arms out. I laid down on the carpet. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, I have the suspect. Master bedroom. Send backup. I closed my eyes. I was caught. But the evidence was on me. They'd have to log it. They'd have to read it. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to the courtroom. And I had the ammo. The floor was cold against my cheek. The carpet smelled of lavender and dust. I could hear the young deputy's breathing, fast, shallow. He was terrified. A terrified man with a gun is more dangerous than a professional with a plan. "Don't move," he yelled again, his voice cracking. "I'm not moving," I said, keeping my tone even. "Officer, listen to me. My name is Hunter Harding. I'm a former Marine Scout sniper. If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't be lying here." "Shut up. I'm cooperating. But you need to look at the envelope. The one sticking out of my shirt." I said shut up. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Heavy boots. "Miller. Status." A gruff voice boomed from the hallway. "Suspect secured. Master bedroom." Miller yelled, still aiming at my head. Two more deputies burst into the room. These guys were older, calmer. One of them, a sergeant with gray hair, holstered his weapon when he saw I was prone and compliant. "Okay, son," the sergeant said, stepping forward. "Hands behind your back. Slow." I did as I was told. The cuffs clicked tight, too tight, but I didn't complain. As they hauled me up, the envelope slipped from my shirt and hit the floor. "Pick that up," I said to the sergeant. "Please. It's the motive." The sergeant looked at the envelope, then at me. He bent down and picked it up. He didn't open it. He just tucked it under his arm. "We'll sort it out at the station," he said. "Right now, you're under arrest for aggravated assault, breaking and entering, and attempted murder." "It wasn't acid," I said as they marched me out. "It was blue dye? Check the scene. Check the victim. The victim is being treated for chemical burns. Harding. Save it for the lawyer." They walked me past the open door of the library. I saw the empty leather couch where Felix had been. The house felt hollow now. Outside, the scene was a circus. Neighbors were gathered at the edge of the property. News vans were already setting up. Morgan knew how to play the media. I scanned the crowd as they shoved me into the back of a cruiser. And then I saw him, standing near the ambulance where Violet was being checked out. He wasn't a medic. He wasn't a cop. He was wearing a suit. He was holding a briefcase. It was the family lawyer, Gregory Kane. He caught my eye. He didn't wave. He just tapped his watch and gave me a grim nod. 48 hours. That's what Reeves had promised. I sat back against the hard plastic seat as the cruiser pulled away. The sirens didn't wail this time. It was a silent ride. At the station, they processed me like just another perp. Fingerprints. Mugshot. Jumpsuit. They put me in interrogation room B, the one with the two-way mirror. I knew the drill. They'd let me sit for an hour, stew in my own adrenaline, before they came in to play good cop, bad cop. But I wasn't stewing. I was planning. The door opened 20 minutes later. It wasn't the sergeant. It was a man in a sharp suit. Not a cop. "Hunter Harding. Who are you?" "I'm Assistant District Attorney Vance. And you, Mr. Harding, are in a world of trouble." He sat down, dropping a file on the table. "Your stepmother claims you've been harassing her for weeks. That you're unstable. That you tried to disfigure your own sister to punish the family for cutting you out of the will." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Is that her story? That I wanted the money?" "It fits," Vance said, shrugging. "Disgruntled veteran. Financial trouble. You snap. It's a clean narrative. It's a lie. Did you check the acid?" Vance paused. He opened the file. "The lab results are preliminary. But yes, it appears to be industrial marking dye. So no attempted murder," I said. "No intent to kill. Just a prank. Or a lesson. Assault with a deadly weapon doesn't require the weapon to be deadly if the victim believed it was," Vance countered. "She thought she was dying. That's psychological torture. She was going to pour it on my sister," I said, leaning forward. I stopped her. "We have no proof of that. We only have your bullet in her shoulder and her testimony that you attacked her." "Check the envelope," I said. "The one the sergeant picked up. $5 million life insurance policy on Violet. Beneficiary, Morgan Vane. Taken out 2 weeks ago." Vance frowned. He dug through his file. "I don't have an envelope." My blood went cold. "The sergeant," I said. "Gray hair." He picked it up in the bedroom. Vance shook his head. "There was no envelope logged in evidence, Hunter. Just your gun and your knife." I sat back, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Morgan had reached the cops. Or the sergeant was dirty. Or maybe she just got to the evidence bag before it was sealed. It didn't matter. The proof was gone. You need a lawyer, Vance said, standing up. Because right now, you're looking at 20 years. He walked out. I was alone in the box. No evidence. No allies. No way out. But then, I remembered something. The shed. When I had swapped the jugs, I hadn't just poured the acid into the ditch. I had kept a small sample. In a vial. And I had hidden it. Not in the woods. Not in my truck. I had hidden it inside the hollow metal post of the for sale sign Morgan had put up at the edge of the property 3 days ago, a sign she claimed was just testing the market. If I could get someone to that sign. The door opened again. Lawyers here, the guard grunted. Gregory Kane walked in. He looked tired. They're burying you, Hunter, he said, sitting down. The press is already calling you this sniper of suburbia. The evidence is gone, I said. The policy. They lost it. I figured, Kane said. But I have something else. He pulled a small tablet from his briefcase. Remember that forensic accountant I told you about? He didn't just find the money trail. He found the communications. Kane tapped the screen. Morgan has a burner phone. She thought it was secure. It wasn't. He turned the tablet around. It was a text thread. From 2 days ago. Recipient. Unknown number Morgan. The old man is fading fast. The girl is next. Get the cleaner ready. I want the house listed by Monday. Unknown. Be careful. The brother is back. Morgan. The brother is my insurance policy. I'm going to frame him for the whole thing. I looked at Kane. This is admissible. It is if we can link the phone to her physically, Kane said. But she ditched it. We need the device. I know where it is, I said. Kane looked surprised. You do? In the shed, I said. When I broke in the first time, I heard a vibration. Under the floorboards. I didn't check it then because I was focused on the acid. But she must have a stash spot there. The police have the property sealed, Kane said. Then we need someone who isn't police, I said. Someone she won't suspect. I looked at the two-way mirror. We need Violet. Violet is in the hospital, Hunter. She's traumatized. She's a survivor, I said. Get her a message. Tell her to check the floorboard under the potting bench. Tell her it's the key to the white picket fence. Kane stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll try. But Hunter, if this fails, you're going to prison. If this fails, I said, prison is the least of my worries. Because she's going to finish the job. The holding cell was small, concrete, and cold. I sat on the metal bench, counting the rivets in the wall. 48. 49. Time was fluid in a place like this. Hours felt like minutes, minutes like days. I had no watch, no phone. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the knot of anxiety tightening in my gut. Had King gotten to her? Was Violet smart enough, brave enough, to find the phone? I closed my eyes and pictured the layout of the shed. The potting bench was in the back corner. The loose floorboard was under a stack of terracotta pots. If she moved them wrong, they'd crash. If she made noise. A buzzer sounded. The heavy steel door groaned open. Harding, you made bail. I looked up, blinking. What? Your lawyer posted it. 500 grand. Someone has deep pockets. I stood up, my legs stiff. King didn't have that kind of money. Neither did I. I walked out to the processing desk. They handed me a plastic bag with my wallet, keys, and belt. I signed the paperwork without reading it. When I pushed through the precinct doors into the cool night air, a black sedan was waiting at the curb. The window rolled down. It wasn't Kane. It was a man I didn't recognize. Sharp suit. Military haircut. Sunglasses at night. Get in, Hunter, he said. I hesitated, hand drifting to a weapon I didn't have. Who are you? A friend of Reeves. He said you needed an extract. I got in. The car smelled of new leather and gun oil. Where's Kane? I asked. Safe house. The driver said, pulling into traffic. He got the package. The phone. And the girl. My heart slammed against my ribs. Violet. The driver nodded. She's got grit, your sister. Kane created a diversion at the hospital, threatened a lawsuit over the chemical burns. While the staff was scrambling, Violet slipped out the back. We picked her up 2 blocks away. She had the phone. And Morgan? She's still at the hospital. But she knows the girl is gone. She's panicked. She's moving assets as we speak. We drove in silence for 20 minutes, winding through the back roads until we reached a nondescript cabin near the reservoir. I burst through the door before the car fully stopped. Violet was sitting at the kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket, holding a mug of tea. She looked small, pale, but her eyes were clear. The blue dye was still staining her neck, but she was alive. Hunter. She launched herself at me, burying her face in my chest. I held her tight, feeling her shake. I did it, she sobbed. I found it. I was so scared, but I found it. Kane was sitting at the table, typing furiously on a laptop. A cracked burner phone was plugged into it. You cut it close, Kane said without looking up. But we got it. The texts are damning. Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance fraud. And the pills, she was buying them from a vet clinic under a fake name. They're heavy sedatives used for euthanizing large animals. That's what she gave Felix, I said, my voice low. We have enough to put her away for life, Kane said. But there's a problem. What? The money. She started a wire transfer 2 hours ago. $5 million from the estate trust to an offshore account in the Caymans. Once it clears, it's gone. And she'll run. When does it clear? 9 a.m. tomorrow. When the banks open. I looked at the clock on the wall. 0200 hours. 7 hours. We can't stop a wire transfer from here, Kane said. We need Felix. He's the primary account holder. If he calls the bank and flags it as fraud, they freeze it instantly. Felix is in the hospital, Violet said. Morgan has him in a private room. She has guards. Private security, the driver said from the doorway. Ex-military. Contractors. Not cops. I looked at Violet, then at Kane. Then we go get him. Hunter, Kane warned. You're out on bail. If you go near that hospital, you violate the restraining order. You go back inside, and this time, you don't come out. I don't care, I said. Felix is dying. And if that money disappears, Violet loses everything. I turned to the driver. You have gear. He smiled, a cold, professional smile. Trunk. I walked out to the car. The trunk popped open. Inside was a tactical vest, zip ties, and a non-lethal beanbag shotgun. Reeves sends his regards, the driver said. I strapped on the vest. It felt good. Familiar. Stay here, I told Violet. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. Hunter, she whispered. I'm bringing him home, Vi. I got in the car. The driver gunned the engine. We hit the hospital at 0300. We didn't go through the front. We went to the loading dock. The security was tighter than I expected. 2 guys in suits at the elevators. Earpieces. Bulges under their jackets. Distraction? The driver asked. Fire alarm, I said. He pulled the lever. Clang, clang, clang. The strobes flashed. Chaos erupted. Nurses and patients started filing into the hallways. The 2 guards looked at each other, confused. One tapped his earpiece. Command, we have an alarm. Advise. I moved through the crowd of evacuees, head down, wearing a borrowed orderly scrub top over my vest. I slipped past them into the stairwell. 4th floor. VIP wing. I took the stairs 3 at a time. I kicked the door open on the 4th floor. Morgan was there. She wasn't in a bed. She was dressed. Packing a bag. Felix was still in the bed, hooked up to monitors. She looked up, her eyes widening. You, she hissed. She reached into her bag. I didn't wait. I racked the shotgun. CHK. Don't, I said. She froze, her hand half deep in the designer leather bag. It's over, Vanessa, I said, stepping into the room. We have the phone. We have the diary. And the wire transfer didn't clear. That was a bluff. But she didn't know that. You're lying, she spat. Try me. Call your banker. See who answers. It'll be the FBI. She hesitated. Her eyes darted to the door, then the window. You can't shoot me, she sneered. Not here. Not with witnesses. I'm not here to shoot you, I said. I'm here for him. I nodded to Felix. Felix, I shouted. Wake up. He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at me, confused. Hunter, she tried to kill you, Uncle Felix. The pills, the acid, it was all her. Morgan lunged. Not at me. At Felix. She grabbed a syringe from the bedside table, something she must have prepped. If I go down, he goes with me, she screamed, holding the needle to his foreline. I had a clear shot, but a beanbag round at this range could kill her. And if she flinched, the needle goes in. I lowered the weapon. Okay, I said. Okay, you win. Take the car. Go. She smiled. Smart boy. She started backing toward the door, dragging the four-pole with her, keeping the needle poised. I'm walking out of here, she said. And if you follow me, he dies. She reached the doorway, and then a shadow moved behind her. A cane swung out of the darkness. A heavy, wooden cane. Crack. It connected with Morgan's wrist. The syringe flew across the room. She shrieked, clutching her arm. Standing behind her, looking pale but furious, was Gregory Kane. I object, he said breathless, to you murdering my client. I tackled her. We hit the floor hard. She fought like a wildcat, scratching and biting, but I pinned her. Stay down. I warned. I zip-tied her hands behind her back. The fire alarm was still blaring. I stood up, breathing hard. Felix was sitting up, staring at his wife, the woman who had poisoned him, isolated him, and tried to kill his niece. Morgan, he whispered. She looked up from the floor, her face twisted in hate. You pathetic old fool, she spat. You should have died months ago. Felix looked at her, then at me, and for the first time in weeks, the fog cleared from his eyes. Hunter, he said, his voice weak but steady. Call the bank. The police arrived 6 minutes later. By then, Morgan was restrained on the floor, still spitting venom, and Felix had made 3 phone calls. The first was to the bank. The wire transfer was frozen mid-transit. The second was to his attorney. Kane was already drafting the power of attorney revocation. The third was to the FBI. It turned out Morgan, or Vanessa, or whatever her real name was, wasn't just wanted in Texas. She had active warrants in 3 states. Fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder. The feds had been building a case for 2 years, but she kept slipping through jurisdictions, changing identities, marrying new targets. Until now. Special Agent Cortez arrived at the hospital just as the local deputies were hauling Morgan out in cuffs. She was still screaming about her rights, about how I'd assaulted her, about how this was all a misunderstanding. Cortez didn't even glance at her. She walked straight to me. Hunter Harding, that's me. She extended a hand. Agent Cortez, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. I've been chasing this woman for 26 months. You just did what 3 field offices couldn't. I had motivation, I said. She smiled grimly. We'll need your statement. All of it. The shed, the swap, the shot, everything. Am I under arrest? For what? Defending your sister from an attempted assault with a chemical weapon? No, Mr. Harding. You're not under arrest. You're a witness. And if the DA has any sense, he'll drop the charges by noon. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Behind me, Felix was being prepped for transport to a detox facility. The doctors said he'd been systematically poisoned with veterinary-grade sedatives mixed with blood pressure medication. Another week and his organs would have shut down completely. But he was alive. Violet arrived 30 minutes later, escorted by Kane and the driver. She ran to Felix's bedside, sobbing, holding his frail hand. I'm sorry, Felix whispered, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry, Violet. I was weak. I let her. Shoo, Violet said, pressing her forehead to his. You're safe now. We're all safe. I stood in the doorway, watching them. The war was over. The enemy was in custody. The estate was secure. But something still gnawed at me. I pulled Agent Cortez aside. The insurance policy. The one on Violet. How did Morgan think she'd collect if Violet was disfigured, not dead? Cortez pulled out a tablet, scrolling through documents. Good question. We found the answer in her cloud storage. She had a secondary plan. If the disfigurement didn't drive Violet to suicide, which was her expectation, she planned to stage a mercy killing. She'd convince Felix to euthanize Violet to end her suffering, then claim it was assisted suicide. She had forged medical documents ready to go, diagnosing Violet with severe depression and PTSD. My hands clenched into fists. She thought of everything. Not everything, Cortez said. She didn't account for you. 2 weeks later, the charges against me were formally dismissed. The DA issued a public apology, citing new evidence and extraordinary circumstances. Morgan, whose real name turned out to be Vanessa Elise Rain, was indicted on 14 counts, including attempted murder, insurance fraud, elder abuse, and poisoning. Her bail was set at $10 million. She couldn't make it. Felix spent 3 weeks in a rehabilitation facility, detoxing from the cocktail of drugs she'd been feeding him. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. His memory was returning slowly, in fragments. Some days he remembered her cruelty. Other days, he still thought she loved him. Trauma does that. It rewrites reality until you can't trust your own mind. But he was healing. Violet moved back into the house. We tore down the privacy wall and rebuilt the white picket fence, just like Dad had it. We cleared out Morgan's things, the cameras, the microphones, the imported furniture that smelled like her perfume, and donated it all. The house felt lighter, like it could breathe again. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, oiling the hinges on the new gate, when a car pulled up. It was Reeves. "Thought you might need this back," he said, tossing me a duffel bag. I opened it. My rifle. Cleaned, oiled, wrapped in a soft cloth. "Recovered it from the evidence locker," he said, grinning. "Figured you earned it." "Thanks," I said. "I owe you." "You owe me a beer," Reeves said. "And a story. I want to hear the whole thing, start to finish." I laughed. "You got time?" "I got all night." We sat on the porch, drinking cheap beer and watching the sun set over the property. I told him everything. The bugs. The shed. The swamp. The shot. When I got to the part about the blue dye, he nearly choked on his drink. "You swapped the acid? You didn't even know if she was going to use it." "I knew," I said quietly. I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't just cruel. She was a predator. And predators don't stop until they're put down. Reeves raised his bottle. "To putting down predators." I clinked mine against his. "To family." A month later, the trial began. I testified. Violet testified. Felix testified, though it broke him to admit how completely she'd controlled him. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Vanessa Rain was sentenced to 45 years in a federal prison. No parole. No early release. When the judge read the sentence, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at me from across the courtroom, her eyes cold and empty. I stared back, and then I walked out. Violet was waiting on the courthouse steps, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "For Mom and Dad," she said. "I thought we could visit them. Tell them it's over." "Yeah," I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Let's go home." We drove to the cemetery. The graves were side by side, under a massive oak tree. We laid the flowers on the stones and stood in silence. "Do you think they knew?" Violet asked softly. "About her?" "I think," I said. "They sent me back when they did for a reason." Violet leaned her head on my shoulder. "What are you going to do now? You can't stay here forever. You have a life." I looked out at the rolling hills, the forest where I'd spent days watching over her from the shadows. "Maybe," I said. "But right now, there's nowhere else I'd rather be." Felix joined us a week later, officially discharged from rehab. He looked older, but stronger. The fog was gone. His hands didn't shake anymore. "I signed the deed over," he said one evening over dinner. "The house is yours and Violet's. Like it should have been. You don't have to." I started. "I do," Felix interrupted. "I failed you both. I let that woman into our lives, and I nearly destroyed everything your parents built. The least I can do is make it right. You're not leaving, are you? Violet asked, alarmed. Felix smiled. No, kid. I'm not leaving. I'm just stepping back. This is your home. I'm just the old man in the guest room. We laughed. It felt good. That night, I sat on the porch again, watching the stars. The rifle was locked away in the gun safe. The surveillance equipment was gone. The shed was just a shed again. The war was over. But I wasn't the same man who'd come home 2 months ago. I'd seen the worst of humanity. I'd seen what greed and cruelty could do to a family. But I'd also seen resilience. I'd seen Violet find her courage. I'd seen Felix fight through the fog. I'd seen strangers, Kane, Reeves, even that nervous deputy, step up when it mattered. And I'd learned something. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they just show up. They do the hard thing. They protect the people who can't protect themselves. And they don't quit. Not until the fight is won. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. Captain Mercer, Veterans Outreach Program. I typed a message, looking for work. Preferably helping people who can't help themselves. Interested? The reply came 2 minutes later. When can you start? I smiled. Tomorrow. I hit send, stood up, and walked back inside. Violet was asleep on the couch, curled up under a blanket. Felix was in the kitchen, washing dishes, humming an old song Dad used to sing. I locked the door. I turned off the lights. And for the first time in months, I slept without my rifle within arm's reach. Because the house was safe. My family was safe. And I'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, the hardest battles aren't fought with bullets. They're fought with love, with patience, with the refusal to give up on the people who matter most. And that's a war I'd fight again. Every single time. 6 months later, the farmhouse looked exactly like I remembered it from my childhood. The siding was white again. The hydrangeas were blooming along the porch railing. And the silence, the real, peaceful silence of a home, had returned. I was in the kitchen, frying bacon. Violet was sitting at the island, reading a college textbook. She was studying criminal psychology. She said she wanted to know how minds like Morgan's worked, so she could stop them before they hurt anyone else. Felix walked in from the garden, holding a basket of tomatoes. He looked healthy. The color was back in his cheeks, and he'd gained back the weight he lost. He still had bad days. Days where he'd stare out the window for too long, but they were getting fewer. Mail's here, Felix said, dropping a stack of envelopes on the counter. I flipped through them. Bills, flyers, and a thick, cream-colored envelope addressed to me. I opened it. It was a wedding invitation. Sergeant Reeves and Sarah Miller. I smiled. Reeves finally convinced her. Who's it from? Violet asked, stealing a piece of bacon. Reeves, I said. He's getting hitched. We should go, she said. He saved my life. Yeah, I said. He did. I looked around the kitchen. It was a simple moment. Just breakfast. But after everything we'd been through, it felt like a miracle. I walked out to the porch with my coffee. The morning sun was cutting through the mist in the valley. I could see the tree lean where I'd spent those cold nights watching, waiting, praying I wouldn't have to pull the trigger. I thought about the bullet casing. I'd kept it. It was sitting on my dresser, a reminder of how close we came to losing everything. A reminder that the line between victim and survivor is razor thin. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Agent Cortez. Just wanted you to know. Rain's appeal was denied. She's not getting out. Ever. I typed back. Thanks, Agent. Stay safe. I put the phone away and leaned against the railing. The war was truly over. The enemy was gone. The fortress was just a home again. But as I looked at the peaceful woods, I knew one thing for sure. Peace isn't something you find. It's something you make. And sometimes, you have to fight like hell to keep it. Violet came out and stood beside me. She didn't say anything. She just leaned her head on my shoulder, watching the sunrise. You know, she said softly, I used to be afraid of the dark, because I thought monsters were hiding in it. And now? I asked. She smiled, a genuine, bright smile that reached her eyes. Now I know the monsters should be afraid of us. I wrapped my arm around her. Damn right, kid. We stood there for a long time, just breathing. The air smelled of pine and damp earth and freedom. I took a sip of coffee and looked directly at you, the one listening to this story. Because here's the truth. We all have a Morgan in our lives. Maybe not a killer with a vial of acid, but someone who tries to take, to control, to break us. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can let them win, or you can dig in. You can fight. You can protect what's yours. I made my choice. What about you? Wait, don't click off yet. I have a serious question for you. If you were in my shoes, if you saw someone holding a weapon over your family and you had the shot, would you take it? Even if it meant going to prison? Even if it meant becoming a monster yourself? I want to know. Tell me in the comments. I would take the shot, or I would find another way. Be honest. Because until you're looking through that scope, you never really know who you are. And hey, I'm genuinely curious. Where are you watching from right now? I see comments from all over the world, and it blows my mind that this story reached you. Drop your city or country below. I read every single one. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you want more stories about betrayal, justice, and the kind of revenge that feels earned, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe. Watch your six. Signed, Hunter.